Welcome to Conversations in Tinnitus, a video podcast of the American Tinnitus Association. The American Tinnitus Association is a public charity under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, a charity dedicated to research, advocacy, education, and support for people living with tinnitus, including their families. Conversations in Tinnitus video podcasts reflect our mission to amplify the patient voice, showcase evidence-based and promising emerging treatments, and highlight cutting-edge research. All of this is made possible through your generous support. Thank you. Hi, and welcome back. We are here today to talk a little bit about the importance of advice, reliable advice, and where you can find it when it comes to the world of tinnitus. We're thrilled to be joined by our next guest, LaGuinn Sherlock, an audiologist, a research audiologist with a very impressive career that spans over 30 years. LaGuinn has a very unique expertise in clinical and research audiology, which helps not only civilian, but also military populations. She's based at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and she dives deep into topics like tinnitus prevalence in the military, innovative screening techniques, and management protocols, which are all very important in the world of tinnitus, as we know. A very fun fact about LaGuinn, she's not only a champion of science, which we love, especially in the field of tinnitus, but she also helped to shape the VA and Department of Defense clinical practice guideline for tinnitus. And she's played a key role in launching the American Tinnitus Association's Tinnitus Advisors Program, which we're going to get into today, as well as having served formerly as a board member to the American Tinnitus Association. So without further ado, our star audiologist for the conversation, LaGuinn, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And you know, on behalf of not only everyone that works for the ATA and is a stakeholder of the ATA, but on behalf of the as many as 70 million Americans that have tinnitus, thank you for everything you do.
No, my pleasure.
So we're thrilled to have you here today, and our hope is to really just have an informal conversation, but really get into a little bit of your specialty and some of the things you've seen over your 30 years of practice, particularly when it comes to things like symptoms, reliable advice and information from a scientific perspective, and then of course your role in something the ATA does as its public charity work, which is the Tinnitus Advisor Program, which we'll touch towards the end. But I think maybe a good place to get us started, LaGuinn, would be maybe if you could just start off by telling us about why is tinnitus important? More importantly, why would it be important for me? You know, I'm not only the CEO for the American Tinnitus Association, I happen to suffer from tinnitus myself. But why would it be important for someone like me or someone else to notice those tinnitus symptoms early, and how do you notice those symptoms early? But more importantly, once you do, what should we do early on for intervention?
It's a good question. So tinnitus is generally, the thing I want everybody to keep in mind is that tinnitus is a symptom, and it can be a symptom of injury to the auditory system or injury to the brain. The tinnitus itself is not necessarily the problem. It's the way it makes you feel. It's the way people respond to it. That's where ultimately tinnitus becomes the big problem. And so in the beginning, you want to rule out any underlying medical condition that can be treated that might be causing this symptom of tinnitus. But for the majority of people, there is no specific treatable underlying cause. And when that occurs, sometimes people just need reassurance that there's nothing serious happening, and then they can sort of ignore this benign sensation. But other people become very, very concerned about what it means, what's going on, what's happening.
Really interesting. So it can be a range of things, right? So is it fair to say early on, actually, this is a good question I should know the answer to. Is it possible to have your first experience of these symptoms be severe, or are they always benign at first?
Oh, that's so. I mean, it can be severe in terms of loudness. Typically, when I'm talking to patients and they describe their tinnitus as severe, they're referring to how loud it is. As a clinician, I tend to look at severity in terms of how it affects day-to-day living and quality of life. So there could be an initial tinnitus onset that's very loud that might be associated with an acoustic trauma. There's an explosion, an airbag goes off, somebody goes to the racetrack with no earplugs. They go to the firing range with no earplugs, or somebody's getting medically treated for cancer with some of the chemotherapy drugs can cause tinnitus. And so sometimes that tinnitus comes on very suddenly after an event, and sometimes it sort of comes on over days or weeks. And so there's always that initial concern, like, why do I have this? So if somebody's firing weapons, like in the military, when the soldiers are firing their weapons and their ears are ringing afterwards, they know where that's coming from. That's an expected thing and a common thing. I'm not so sure that people, for example, going through chemotherapy are given advanced warning that they may have tinnitus as a result of the chemo. And so that can be very concerning. Like, why do I have this symptom?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I mean, selfishly, I had chemotherapy as a teenager twice. I had cancer twice between the ages of 15 and 18. That's when I started noticing my tinnitus symptoms. This was in the late 90s, so maybe the scientific awareness was different back then for the cytotoxicity, but zero warning. So when I woke up one morning in the hospital experiencing that ringing, I was terrified. And it wasn't until I was, I think, 16 or 17 at the time. I was young. But I told my father about it. And the first thing that brought me relief, because I didn't know to expect it, was when my father, for the first time in my life, told me he had that same sensation. And he started to explain what he thought it was until we finally saw an audiologist and got a hearing screening and figured it out. But that's really fascinating for a cancer patient. You may not know to expect that ahead of time. So it can be scary. And then I would imagine you go to a concert, or you serve in a field of battle, or in a theater, or you go to the gun range, you would expect that ringing sensation. You go to a fireworks, but there are certain situations where you might not, and it can be a scary experience. Which actually that kind of leads to the next question here, which would be, you notice it now, right? Whether it's severe or benign. What should you do next?
Well, I generally recommend that somebody, when you start noticing ringing in the ears and you're not really sure, you don't associate it with a noise exposure, or you're concerned about a new medication, a good first step is to have your hearing tested, because there's such a strong association between tinnitus and hearing loss. But not everybody with tinnitus has measurable hearing loss. And so sometimes the tinnitus is coming from certain medications. So if you started a new medication or had a change in dose, and you start noticing tinnitus, then go back to your prescribing doctor and let them know that you're having this new symptom. In some cases, there is a fair number of people who have somatosensory tinnitus, where the tinnitus changes in volume or pitch with certain jaw movements or neck movements. And so in those cases, you can be screened for somatosensory tinnitus, and that might indicate that you should be seen by your dentist to have your jaw checked, see if you need a bite guard for nighttime use. There might be, if there's neck problems, maybe you need to go to physical therapy. So it's not just audiology, but audiology is a good place to start.
Follow-up question to this idea. So, is it possible that one could come across a general practice physician or a primary care provider, or they could even go to an ENT, say, an otolaryngologist, or even an audiologist? Is it possible I could go to any one of these providers and discover they don't necessarily know that much about tinnitus? What do I do at that point?
Yeah. Well, that's when you call the American Tinnitus Association Tinnitus Advisors Program, and we can try to get you in the right place. Because that is an experience that people report. I hear this every week from people all around the country saying, I went to an ENT or I went to an audiologist, and they just told me it's tinnitus and there's nothing that can be done about it. And it's unfortunate, because there's a lot that can be done to help people live better with tinnitus. So while it's true we don't have a specific cure right now to just turn it off, there's no pill and there's no surgery, but there's lots of ways to learn to live better with it so it's not affecting your day-to-day life and not affecting your quality of life.
Um, so there are lots of things that we can do. Maybe you could help us understand some of them, particularly when it comes to lifestyle habits. So,
Mhm.
uh, if this is something that, in my personal experience and what I've learned serving in this role for the charity, the American Tinnitus Association, um, this is not, for example, the only examples I can use are my personal ones right now. But so as a cancer survivor, or even with my broken bone, I broke my ankle, right?
Mhm.
So there was a thing that happened. Pain, pain was a subsequent side effect of the thing that happened. I went to the doctor. He did a thing. It got better, and now it's in the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah.
Tinnitus is not that, right? Tinnitus is something that does not come and then end. And well, that's not true. I guess for some folks it may go away, but
Mhm.
it likely is something that's going to involve lifestyle changes. In other words,
Yes. Yeah.
a daily adjustment to what you do. So, what are some of those things we can do?
Yeah. Well, I really like the way you phrased that. You broke the ankle, you had pain. So in this case, you had an acoustic trauma or a car accident or treatment, and you got tinnitus. So tinnitus is very analogous to pain. And so then you go to the doctor and the doctor does something. So in this context, it could be you get hearing aids to address the auditory injury of hearing loss, or you what we're really focused on is changing the reaction to the symptom. So when you have chronic tinnitus, um, we can't make it go away, but we can change the reaction to it and work on helping the brain habituate to a body sensation that is uncomfortable and irritating. But if we change the way we think about it, we can change the reaction and put it in the rearview mirror. It's still there if you look for it, but it's not right in front of you, right in front of the windshield. So
So, a follow up to that idea would be, you mentioned I mentioned your work with the VA, but you've mentioned the military, which we know is a highly affected population, obviously a loud environment. First
mhm.
responders would be another one. Uh,
Yeah.
we know musicians and everyone in the entertainment industry, not
Mhm.
just the musicians themselves, but everyone from roadies to the folks checking the tickets at the stadium.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, Loud environment. So if you work in one of these noise pollutant environments,
Mhm.
what is a good uh, habit or lifestyle change to get into in that situation?
Number one is you carry earplugs with you. So it's so incredibly important to wear hearing protection devices, and there's so many different options for that. Um, but it can, I understand that it can be uncomfortable. Like you plug up the ears, the earplugs themselves might be uncomfortable, or that feeling that you can't hear what's going on around you and you feel like you need to hear. But there are filtered earplugs for musicians. Is what happens when you put in like a foamy earplug, it cuts all the sound, but it cuts it decreases more of the low frequencies, so things sound really unnatural. And so with filtered earplugs, we try to maintain the natural frequency response so it doesn't sound as distorted. So that's, there's a lot of musicians using those filtered earplugs, and anybody can get them. You typically need to go to an audiologist to get ear impressions and get them ordered. You can do the foam earplugs or the silicone earplugs that you can find in the pharmacies. Um, and those are good for lots of noise exposure. So if you are using power tools like mowing the lawn and using a leaf blower, then you definitely want to be using hearing protection, and that could be the foam earplugs or the muffs that go over the ears. You can use earplugs and ear muffs, but it doesn't double your protection, but it will increase your protection from those loud sounds. Um, and so there's a time intensity trade-off. If you're in really, really, really loud sound, you can really only be in that environment for maybe an hour before injury and damage starts occurring. And so there's lots of guidance about that on the internet. When you go to the .org and the .gov sites, you'll get some really good information about tinnitus. And one of them would be sort of what an appropriate noise exposure level is. There you go.
I love that you are just segueing into where I'm going next. This is perfect. So, Yeah, you're gonna want to learn more, right? And if I've learned anything in my 25 plus years suffering from tinnitus myself, but then particularly now serving on behalf of the American Tinnitus Association, it is that there is no shortage of results in Google when I type the word
Mhm.
tinnitus.
Yeah.
So obviously, we were founded. The ATA was founded with the mission to combat that very problem, to provide reliable information to the
Mhm.
public. But if I were to go online beyond uh, ATA.org or the American Tinnitus Association, where do I go, and
Mhm.
how do I suss out, sort of like what for lack of a better analogy here, the words fake news we've heard a
Uh,
lot over the last
mhm.
5 6 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's somewhat applicable to tinnitus, right? So how do I, a layperson, suss out fake science when it comes to tinnitus? Where should I look?
Yeah. So, again, the .org and the .gov sites are going to be the most reliable information. So, NIH.gov has information about tinnitus. You can go to the Audiology Association, so it's audiology.org, or ASHA.org. Um, those sites will have legitimate information about tinnitus. If you're interested in looking for a clinical trial on tinnitus, you go to clinicaltrials.gov, and see if there's something in your area. There's not a whole lot of clinical trials going on right now, but that's another resource to keep in mind. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of misinformation, and I generally tell my patients, like, it's not unusual for us to get on to Dr. Google whenever we have a new symptom, and let's read whatever we can. But at some point, you have to stop, because you're going to get bad information, misinformation, and it's going to ramp up your anxiety about this symptom.
Uh, I don't think it's funny because in my personal life I've experienced a lot of healthcare maladies, and then I worked in a previous life as a corporate healthcare attorney.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I've been in nonprofit work for a while now, mostly in healthcare. And it wasn't until recently that I heard the term Dr. Google. And I think it's perfect because, boy, is it easy to spiral out.
Mhm.
And whether I was working with a client, dealing with my own issue or a loved one's issue, or trying to learn more about a particular topic, it is tempting to go down that Dr. Google rabbit hole. So .org, .gov sources are reliable.
Mhm.
Um, I think you touched on something that's important to point out, which is evidence-based. The term evidence-based, where
Mhm.
you can find it, is more reliable than not.
Yeah.
We have a lot of friends and partners in this space who, especially when we're talking about treatments or products,
Mhm.
terms like
Mhm.
evidence-based start to become very important. And one thing that I think the ATA is proud to do, and we're going to be doing more of it, and that's what Tinnitus Awareness Week is about, which is when
Mhm.
this will be published. But is providing links to those resources, right? So
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
would love for folks to come to ata.org, but we are not the only source of reliable information, and
Right.
so we will continue to link out on our social channels and on our landing pages other sources of reliable information, because you just listed the sources you just listed. Now we'll make sure we have
Mhm.
at the bottom of this video, but we'll also make sure they're on our website as well. So if
Mhm.
folks want to go and check those out, they can check out ata.org. And I think one thing that's interesting from the perspective of the American Tinnitus Association, and we're talking about Tinnitus Awareness Week, is why would there be a public charity for something like tinnitus? And you've touched on a lot of it, right? And
Mhm.
you see it day in and day out, whether it's with a patient or a veteran, how it can affect your daily life, especially if you're talking about folks that have something that we refer to as bothersome tinnitus,
Mhm.
or worse,
Mhm.
catastrophic or severe tinnitus. So uh, a charity like the ATA exists to help those people find information,
Mhm.
right? So whether it's going to ata.org, or reading our magazine Tinnitus Today, or donating to support the mission, those are three really great things. But the other thing a charity does is provide services that someone else either does not or cannot. And one service that we're very proud to offer is what we call our Tinnitus Advisors Program.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and you were there from the earliest stages of
Mhm.
this idea and this service. This is a service that the ATA provides free to the public
Hmm.
for anyone who wants to know more or needs help. Can you tell us a little bit about what we lovingly refer to as TINAP, or the Tinnitus Advisor Program, and what it is and how to get to it, and what we can expect if we get involved with it?
Sure. Sure. Well, I want to talk a little bit about where this program came from. So, back in the early days of ATA, Jack Vernon used to take calls on Friday afternoons and talk to people all around the country who were very concerned about their tinnitus and weren't sure what to do, were looking for reliable information. And so, over the years, after Jack Vernon was no longer with ATA,
And Jack
when
Vernon was one of our founders, a
yes.
godfather of research in the field of tinnitus out of Oregon.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, in my head, yes, it was always Jack Vernon and ATA go
You
together.
were one of the fortunate folks to have known him personally. I wish I had had the opportunity, but
I
it's
actually did
because of
not know him personally.
no
Yeah,
kidding. Okay.
no, but he is legendary for sure.
Yes.
So, when I came onto the board back in 2017, when people were calling in with questions, I'm sorry, 2015, when people called in with questions to the staff would reach out to the audiologist who would then return those calls. And at the time, I was one of two audiologists on the board. And so when I became chair of the board, I was very interested in us having a program, a formalized program where people could call and they would reliably get a call back from somebody who had some expertise in tinnitus. So right now our program is staffed with audiologists. All of us have worked with many patients with tinnitus, bothersome tinnitus. And so we are there to answer questions about, I have tinnitus, I don't know what to do next. Or I went to audiology and ENT and they said there's nothing I can do. What do I do next? Or I'm really looking for a way to connect with other people who have tinnitus. Where's a good place for me to go? What resources can you find for me in my area? And so that's something that we are able to provide. I'm extremely proud of this program. I think it's really been incredible. I've been there since day one, taking those calls, and I really appreciate the opportunity to help people all around the country year round.
And I cannot understate or overstate. I cannot overstate how impactful this has been. I mean, we some of the numbers we've seen the last couple of years. This past year alone, we took about 2,500 calls
Mhm.
from individuals in 1 year, and we know there are many more folks out there who suffer
Mhm.
from it. I had a conversation with a donor very recently who did not suffer from tinnitus herself, but her husband did, and unfortunately, he eventually took his life as a result of his tinnitus symptoms. And
Mhm.
the family hadn't come across the ATA until after her husband had passed. And
Mhm.
when I told her, well, she knew about it already, but when we spoke about the 800 line in the Tinnitus Advisors Program, she cited it as one of the main reasons why she became a donor,
Oh,
because
wow.
she did not want other families to suffer what her family had suffered.
Mhm.
And so I can't give you enough kudos, because this is what any charity should be doing, providing
Mhm.
a service to the public that is free, easy to access, and
Mhm.
reliable.
Mhm.
And one of my hopes in this role, leading the ATA forward into 2025 and beyond, would be to take what we have now for the Tinnitus Advisors Program and really grow it.
Mhm.
If you had a blank slate, if you had unlimited funds and a completely access to all the resources you wanted,
Hmm.
where would you direct the Tinnitus Advisors Program? What do you think it would do next?
Hmm. So if I could do anything, I mean, I'm sure there would be interest in having a full-time employee who just like took the calls as they came in. Right
Mm,
now, the message is you'll get a call back within 72 hours. I think most people are getting their calls back within 24 hours. We're pretty, like, there's somebody staffing that uh, pretty much every day. But if somebody were there to take the calls immediately, like, how many more people would especially because, when they're calling, that's when they're in, I need somebody right now. And
Yeah.
waiting for a few hours can be a little frustrating, make feel a little hopeless. So that's one thought I have. So,
I love that idea, and that's absolutely already on our roadmap, right? So
mhm,
the only thing keeping an organization like the ATA from making that happen, of course, is support. So whether someone's
mhm,
a member of the American Tinnitus Association, or a donor, and if you're a member, you are a donor. Um, but the ATA cannot give what it does not have,
mhm,
and so you know this better than anyone as a former chair of the board.
mhm,
And thank you for your service. Uh, the ATA has no shortage of need, and desire to do more, and it's with what we have that
mhm,
we can give. So, if folks are watching this, and at this point, obviously, if you need help, you can call our 800 line,
mhm,
which is right here on the bottom of the screen. But if you are so compelled to support our mission, to support a program like the Tinnitus Advisors Program, um, ATA.org is a great place to go and support. And let me ask you this, LaGuinn. So you served as the chair of the board for the ATA. You've seen all of our needs. You know the mission of the ATA intimately, and
mhm.
you've been involved for a very long time. What is it that keeps you involved with the ATA? Why do you continue to support with your time, talent, and treasure?
Because I see it as an incredible resource for a population who's experiencing a really uncomfortable thing. And there just is not enough widespread expertise around the country for people to get good information. And ATA is supporting the research that is moving, that is advancing. Um, Making advances in the treatment options that are available. So if you look at some of the seed funding, some of those have turned into treatment devices over the years. There's certainly still a lot of work in the pharmacological approach to tinnitus, and some of that work has been funded through ATA. But really, it's the education and support that I think is so incredibly valuable. And the people that I talk to every week, I talk to family members too. I've had a number of spouses, mothers, fathers calling because they're so concerned about their family member with tinnitus, and they just don't know what to do to help them. So I just think it's an incredible resource for people.
Well, thank you for moving our needle forward, LaGuinn. You are
Mhm.
absolutely at the forefront of what the ATA does today, and so thank you, and thank you for continuing to serve on the Tinnitus Advisor Program. Most of all, if folks are having issues, our 1-800 line is 1-800-634-8978, or of course our website's ata.org. Likely, if you've come across this video, you've probably found either
Mhm.
our phone number or website at this point. But LaGuinn, thank you for your continued service and dedication to our mission. And if there's ever anything the ATA can do for you, please know you have a friend in us. But thank you for your continued service.
Well, thank you, Patrick, for your leadership and your passion for this organization. So,
Well, I can't wait to see what we do together next.
yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Happy Tinnitus Awareness Week, LaGuinn.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Thank you, everyone, and stay tuned for our next presentation soon. Please consider a donation today.